Alright, purchased an easy steer power steering kit for my 2006 Polaris Sportsman. And when I ordered it, it shows the picture of all the parts. And when I got the packaging, I noticed that the brackets all look different from the packaging that shows on the picture. And also the brain itself that shows right there is different from what came in the packaging as well. It came with a brain that looks like that. So being a little concerned if they sent me the wrong part, I also went to their website from Super ATV, who manufactures it, and the pictures are the same that show on Amazon, which are different from what came in the box. But when I scrolled down, I noticed that it did fits all Sportsman models from 2005 all the way to 2014. And when I contacted ATV or Super ATV, they guaranteed that it was the right part. There might be a couple modifications that need to be done, but it should fit no problem. I got the new power steering kit for my 2006 Polaris Sportsman 500 and took it all out of the box. It's the easy steer components. That's all the stuff that came with it, the brains, all the brackets, shafts, directions, motor, wiring, pretty much everything you need. Directions are pretty straightforward. I don't think it's going to be too big of a deal. Everything looks really colored and easy to read. First thing you got to do is take apart the whole front of it. All the plastics and everything else. So we'll get that done and get back with you. Alright, step one shows remove the seats. And the side panels on both sides. Alright, the next step is removing the whole front clip. Obviously I have some accessories with the headlights. We got all the wires already ready to go, so we're going to take off the bolts. Alright, so taking off the front clip, we got 4 half-inch bolts all around. And you also have screws that screw in the bottom of the fender into the back of the storage case. Alright, next step's removing the whole headlight assembly. So we have the bottom clip, the headlight, the mount, my gun mount, my KC lights, or LED lights. We gotta take all that stuff off. Mostly it's just screws all around. We'll get that done. I'm pulling the top of the speedometer off. We labeled all the wires so we don't forget what they are. For the LEDs and for my switches and the powers for my grip warmers and stuff. So pretty much on the back of the display, we also wrote down what numbers and what numbers match. So when we put it back together, it'll go on properly. What we gotta do is take off the handlebars. In order to get to the bottom bolts, we need to take off the whole bottom assembly. And for the ignition, we got the screw-in bolt on the front that unscrews the ignition from the holder. Handlebars off right now, off the main shaft. This is going to be replaced completely. So now we got to take off the front plastics here around the gas tank. There's bolts on the sides. It all clips down at the bottom, and also clips up front, but you can't see because the steering wheel's in the way right now. We'll get those off. Alright, next step says we got to remove the gas tank in order to remove the shaft. So we're going to take the bolts off, remove the air filter cover, and take off the air intake baffle over here that goes around. Alright, we got everything loosened. Well, I don't want to take the gas tank off completely so we don't have to drip gas everywhere. I want to just get enough room to be able to get in there and pull the shaft out. By moving this out of the way, we should have enough room to get that steering shaft off. Alright, next step in removing the steering shaft, we need to take the tie rods off. There's 2 bolts, one on the bottom, one on the top, and one for each side, left and right. So we'll take those off right now. Tie rods are off. Next step, we have to unbolt the shaft from the frame down here. And there's 2 bolts, one where his finger is and one opposite corner. You can see it up there. You have to get from underneath it in order to get it off. Those are the next 2, and those will probably be a bitch. As predicted, we got the shaft out, but those 2 bolts on the bottom are half-inch screws from the bottom. Were probably the hardest part of the whole, taking the whole thing apart. But we got them unhandled, and then we're gonna clean it up a little bit and start putting it all back together. Alright, so we installed the 2 brackets that holds the motor in place, one on the left and one on the right. Didn't tighten it all the way, just left it nice and snug so in case we move it around to position the motor So next goes the motor. Alright, once installing the bottom bracket, be sure not to tighten the bolts all the way, because you're going to have to move it around and wiggle it to get the steering shaft to align properly. So snug it tight enough where you can move it, but don't put it on too tight. And next on is the motor itself. Alright, so next up, before you mount the motor, be sure and bolt on the tie rods and secure them properly, but still leave that bottom bracket loose so you can adjust the angle to bolt on the motor and the steering arm. If you get the motor mounted, temporarily put the steering arm in and just loose, keep it hand tight. So you can come down here and you gotta look and line up the screw and the motor mounts right here so everything lines up properly, because there will be bolts connecting everything. And once that's secure, we'll put the bolts in and tighten it all down. But you want to make sure the angle is perfect from the bracket to the motor and straight up to the steering arm. Alright, so before you totally set the steering bracket in, obviously you want to get it aligned flat. The good eyeball is kind of hard to see on the camera. Is using this as your base. Right now it's sitting a little bit this way. So what we're doing is using a piece of conduit based off the back tires and spacing it off the front tires to see how far off they are so they're perfectly aligned. So we did the right side, do the left side based off the back tires too, and right there they show straight, but the bracket up here is showing that it's crooked. So what I have to do is loosen these up again, and we'll unbolt the set pin on the bottom, pull this up, move it over a tooth, put it back in, and it should line up pretty good. Alright, so now we're going to pull the steering arm back up to move it over a couple teeth. So we're going to loosen up the set pin. Now we're going to lift it up just a hair. And you also see the groove right here on the steering arm itself coming out of the motor. So the set pin's got to line up properly with that groove. So once we pull it up, move over a couple teeth, put it back in, you got to line that hole up with that groove. Alright. Does that look good? Or you got it out of the way?
Pull it up anymore.
Alright, so once you get everything lined up, you want to go through and start tightening all the bolts up. And most of them aren't too difficult, except for these guys right here. You got one there, and you got one in there. So it takes a little finessing to get those tightened up. Once you got it tightened up, just work your way up, tighten up the steering, and start to put it back together. So next thing on is the handlebars. Alright, so when we got it all installed and put the gas tank back in place, the steering box itself was really close to the gas tank itself, and obviously you don't want that rubbing because it'll end up puncturing a hole. So we had to ground down the aluminum a little bit to make room for the gas tank to fit. So just fair warning to everybody, make sure the gas tank's not rubbing against the steering box. And we're using a little grinding wheel that we got at Lowe's, and it's called a rotary rasp. You can get it in any part of the down at Lowe's or Home Depot. And use that to grind down aluminum. Aluminum is a real pain in the butt to grind as far as using the regular drill bits or grinding bits. So be sure and check that before you mount your gas tank, that it's not rubbing your steering box. Alright, so next step, we got the handlebars back mounted in place, ready to go and nice and secure. And through the gearbox, everything moves, so everything's good to go. So next, we're going to install the brains and get it all wired up and make sure it works properly. Alright, so now we got the brains connected and mounted to the frame as directed, and got all the wires zip tied to the frame and powered up. We got the power wires going back to the battery, and then the blue wire, which is the speed control, we soldered to the back of the speedometer, which is actually the white wire in the middle, and then the key power is the orange wire with the white stripe. And it's already pre-connected. You just plug it right in and it's good to go. So now we'll show you how we test it. As soon as you turn the key on, down here is the LED light. It'll flash one time. That means it's got power and everything's working properly. So right now, you can go ahead with one hand, turn the steering wheel back and forth with no problem. If you turn the key off, it'll show you how hard it is to turn without the power. So key's off now, and it's really stiff. You gotta use pretty much two hands to turn the steering wheel back and forth. So everything's connected, working properly, everything's bolted together, works like a champ. I'm quite impressed. So now it's just a matter of putting it all back together. Alright, next step is putting the frames on. Back together, wired, connected, everything's powered. All my lights work, my strobes work, my winch works. All the fenders are back together, and it works great. Turn the key on, and you got instant power steering. One finger. Gotta love it. Anyways, hope that helped, guys. Anybody else trying to put a power steering in their Polaris ATV? It's not that bad. A couple issues, but all in all, not too hard. Have a good one.